The snow fell silent across the Dakota plains that winter morning in 1876. 23 soldiers lay dead, their blood staining the pristine white. Chief Mapia Luta stood among the bodies, war club dripping crimson. His warriors surrounded him, faces painted for battle, eyes fierce with victory. They had defended their hunting grounds successfully. But Red Cloud felt nothing except the hollow ache in his chest that had lived there for 6 months, since Sarah Whitmore disappeared. She was not Lakota. The daughter of a cavalry colonel, she had arrived at Fort Laramie as a teacher for reservation children. Her blonde hair shone like wheat under summer sun. Her green eyes blazed with purpose. The fort commanders thought she would civilize the native children, teach them to abandon their ways. But Sarah was different from other white women who came west with rigid beliefs and fearful hearts. Red Cloud first saw her in summer 1875 during treaty negotiations. She was reading to Lakota children under a cottonwood tree. Her voice was gentle as she spoke their language imperfectly but sincerely. The children laughed at her mistakes. She laughed with them, delighted by their corrections. Something in that moment struck him like lightning. Their first conversation happened by accident when his horse spooked near the schoolhouse. Sarah emerged to investigate. Their eyes met. 4-3 heartbeats, neither spoke. Then she smiled genuinely. "Your horse is beautiful," she said in stumbling Lakota. "Strong spirit." "You speak my language," he replied in perfect English, surprising her. "Badly. The children are patient teachers, though I test that patience daily." He should have walked away. A chief consorting with a white woman, especially a colonel's daughter, was dangerous. But he found himself returning to that cottonwood tree weekly. Always with some official reason. And always, Sarah was there. They talked at first only briefly. Weather, horses, children. But gradually, conversation stretched longer. She asked about his people, their customs, their beliefs. Not with clinical detachment but genuine hunger to understand. He shared stories he had never told a white person. Stories about spirits in the wind, messages in the stars, his grandmother's teachings about listening to the earth's heartbeat. Sarah shared her stories. Growing up in Boston, suffocated by society's expectations. Her mother dying when she was 12. Caring for 5 younger siblings while her father fought wars. Her desperate need to matter, to teach children that the world was bigger than hate and fear. She spoke of loneliness even surrounded by people. "I understand that feeling," Red Cloud admitted one September afternoon. Golden leaves blazed around them. They sat separated by 10 feet of grass, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain propriety. "The white men want me tame. My own people want me to be the warrior I was. But I am tired of blood. I want real peace." Sarah looked at him with impossibly green eyes. He saw something that terrified him more than cavalry charges. Understanding. Acceptance. And something deeper neither dared name. "What if peace is possible?" she asked softly. "What if 2 people from different worlds could show everyone the way?" He wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that love could bridge the canyon between their peoples. But he had seen too much betrayal, too much death. White men had taken his land, killed his friends, broken every promise. How could he trust them? How could he risk his heart and his people's future on this impossible dream? Yet when Sarah reached across that grass, placing her hand palm up between them, an offering and a question, Red Cloud found himself reaching back. Their fingertips touched briefly before they pulled away, hearts racing. They knew they had crossed an invisible line that could never be uncrossed. That was 4 months before she vanished without trace, leaving only a note claiming she had been called back east. But Red Cloud knew his Sarah. She would never leave without goodbye. Someone had taken her, silenced her, made her disappear. Now, standing in snow over soldiers' bodies, he realized this battle meant nothing. The only war that mattered was bringing Sarah home, even if it cost everything. He thought of their last conversation. Twilight by the creek. Willows trailing branches in water. Sarah troubled, speaking of pressure from her father. Pressure to return east, marry a proper military officer, forget her foolish attachment to Indians. Red Cloud had told her to go if she must. He would not cage her. But she had taken his face in her hands. "I would rather be trapped with you than free without you." Now she was trapped, but not with him. Somewhere in white man's territory, Sarah was being held against her will. Red Cloud knew this with absolute certainty. He felt her absence like a missing limb. Phantom pain that would not cease until he found her or died trying. His second-in-command approached cautiously. "The men ask what we do next. Press our advantage? Strike Fort Laramie while they are weakened?" Red Cloud shook his head slowly. No. We do something more dangerous. We find Sarah. Red Cloud dismissed his warriors back to winter camp with orders to care for the wounded and prepare for possible retaliation. But he did not follow them. Instead, he turned his horse south toward Fort Laramie alone, war paint still marking his face, weapons still stained with morning's violence. His closest friend and war lieutenant, Mtawashti, Good Bear, caught up before he had ridden a mile. "Brother, this is madness," Mta said, bringing his horse alongside. "You cannot ride to the fort after what just happened. They will hang you on sight." "Then let them hang me," Red Cloud replied without slowing. "But not before I find what happened to Sarah." Mta grabbed his reins, forcing both horses to stop. "She is gone, my friend. Accept this truth. The white woman returned to her people. You knew this would happen." Red Cloud turned to face his oldest friend, and Mta recoiled at the pain he saw. "She did not leave willingly. I know this as certainly as I know my own heartbeat. Something happened to her, and I will discover the truth even if I tear that fort apart stone by stone." "You will start a war that will destroy our people," Mta warned. "The army is already looking for reasons to break the treaty. If you attack the fort, you give them exactly what they want." "I am not going to attack," Red Cloud said, though his hand tightened on his war club. "I am going to ask questions. Not to them. Not today, when their soldiers' bodies still lie cooling in snow because of you." Red Cloud closed his eyes, forcing himself to think beyond rage and desperation. Mta was right. Charging into Fort Laramie now would be suicide. But doing nothing was impossible. Every day that passed was another day Sarah might be suffering. 3 days later, a Lakota man walked through Fort Laramie's gates in trader's clothes, hair loose rather than braided for war, weapons hidden beneath a heavy coat. He gave his name as Black Elk, a common name that would not raise suspicion, and said he came to trade furs for winter supplies. The soldiers barely looked at him. To them, one peaceful Indian looked like another. Red Cloud had walked these grounds before during treaty negotiations, but always surrounded by warriors, always watched by suspicious eyes. Now, dressed as a simple trader, he moved through the fort almost invisible. He listened to conversations, watched soldiers' routines, and slowly pieced together what had happened in the months since Sarah disappeared. The colonel's daughter, he learned, had become an embarrassment. She had been too friendly with Indians, too sympathetic to their cause. She had argued with her father publicly about broken treaties and stolen land. She had even been seen meeting alone with Chief Red Cloud himself. "She went mad," a lieutenant said to another soldier as Red Cloud pretended to examine blankets in the trading post. "Started claiming she loved one of the savages. Her father had no choice but to send her away for treatment." Red Cloud's blood turned to ice. Treatment. That word, in the white man's world, meant one thing: an asylum. They had not sent Sarah home. They had locked her away in one of those terrible places where they broke people's spirits with isolation and drugs and treatments designed to make them forget everything they knew and loved. He waited until nightfall, then slipped through shadows to the colonel's quarters. Breaking into an officer's residence was nearly impossible, but desperation made him bold and clever. He found a window left slightly open for air and squeezed through into a private study. Papers covered the desk. But underneath, in a locked drawer that took him precious minutes to pick, he found what he needed. A letter, dated 3 weeks after Sarah's disappearance, from Colonel Whitmore to someone named Dr. Thornton at the New Horizon Sanatorium in Denver. The colonel's handwriting was precise and cold as he described his daughter's delusions, and requested the doctor's most aggressive therapies to cure her of her unnatural attachments. He wanted his daughter back, the letter said, but only after she had been properly corrected, only after every memory of her time teaching Indians had been scrubbed from her mind. Red Cloud stood in that dark office, reading by moonlight, and felt something inside him crack and reform into something harder, sharper, more dangerous than mere anger. They had not just taken Sarah away. They were trying to destroy who she was. The transformation hurt more than any wound Red Cloud had taken in battle. Mta held his friend's long black hair in one hand and a sharp knife in the other, hesitating despite Red Cloud's nod of permission. For a Lakota warrior, cutting one's hair meant mourning or disgrace. But Red Cloud was mourning. Mourning the man he had been, the chief he would no longer be after this choice. "Do it," he said firmly. The hair fell in heavy locks around his feet, each strand a small death. When Mta finished, Red Cloud barely recognized himself in the stream's reflection. His face looked harder without the frame of long hair, older, like a stranger wearing his skin. He dressed in clothes stolen from a settler's cabin. Rough wool pants, cotton shirt, heavy coat. The clothing felt wrong, too tight in some places, too loose in others, smelling of soap and tobacco instead of sage and sweet grass. They traded Red Cloud's magnificent painted war horse for two unremarkable brown geldings that would not draw attention. Every change stripped away another piece of his identity until he felt hollow, like a shell pretending to be human. But when he thought of Sarah locked in that asylum, her mind being poisoned against herself and everything she believed in, he found the strength to continue. The journey to Denver took 12 days through February snow and bitter wind. They passed through small settlements where white farmers looked at them with suspicion but not recognition. Red Cloud practiced speaking only English, hiding his accent, responding to questions with minimum words necessary. He called himself Robert Cloud, a half-breed scout looking for work. The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. Muta pretended to be his cousin, a former reservation Indian who had embraced the white man's ways. They played their roles carefully, heads down, voices soft, never meeting anyone's eyes too directly. It was a special kind of torture. Being invisible in plain sight, pretending to be less than they were so ignorant men would not feel threatened. Denver sprawled before them like a wound on the landscape. All wooden buildings and muddy streets, smoke from 100 chimneys darkening winter sky. The noise overwhelmed Red Cloud at first. So many people shouting, horses whinnying, hammers pounding, music bleeding from saloons. The city smelled of unwashed bodies, animal waste, and something chemical he could not identify. His head ached from constant assault on his senses. The New Horizon Sanatorium sat on the outskirts of town, a 3-story brick building surrounded by high walls topped with metal spikes. Guards patrolled the perimeter, and every window had iron bars. It looked less like a hospital and more like a prison. They watched the building for 3 days, learning its patterns. Doctors arrived at 8 in the morning and left at 6 in the evening. Nurses worked in shifts, changing at dawn, noon, and midnight. Food deliveries came every afternoon. And every evening at 9, a side door opened briefly as 2 orderlies emptied chamber pots into a waste pit behind the building. That door, Red Cloud whispered to Mitu on the 3rd night as they crouched in shadows across the street. That is how we enter. And then what? Mitu asked. This place has dozens of rooms, maybe hundreds of patients. How will you find her? Red Cloud had been thinking about that problem for 3 days. We ask someone who knows. The next afternoon, they followed a young nurse leaving the sanatorium. She was perhaps 20 years old, with tired eyes and ink stains on her fingers. She walked to a small boarding house 6 blocks away, climbed stairs to a 3rd-floor room, and disappeared inside. Red Cloud and Mitu waited until dark, then knocked on her door. When she opened it, Red Cloud had his knife visible but not threatening, held at his side where she could see it. Please do not scream, he said quietly in his most careful English. I am not here to hurt you. I need information about a patient, and then I will leave you in peace. The nurse's eyes went wide with fear, but she was smart enough to recognize that screaming would only make this worse. I don't have any money. I do not want money, Red Cloud replied. I want to know about Sarah Whitmore. Colonel Whitmore's daughter. Is she in the sanatorium? Recognition flashed across the nurse's face, followed by something that looked like pity. You're him, she whispered. You're the Indian she talked about. The chief. Room 42 sat at the end of a long corridor lit by a single flickering gas lamp. A guard slouched in a chair outside the door, half asleep, rifle leaning against the wall. Red Cloud moved like smoke down that hallway, his moccasins silent despite his white man's clothes. Mitu flanked him, war club ready, though they both hoped to avoid violence that would raise alarms. The guard sensed movement at the last moment, but by then Red Cloud's hand was already clamping over his mouth while Mitu's arm locked around his throat. They held him until he went limp, unconscious but alive. Red Cloud felt no satisfaction, only urgency. Every second counted now. His hands shook as he fumbled with the nurse's keys, trying 3 before finding the right one. The lock clicked open, and he pushed the door inward, his heart hammering so hard he thought his ribs might crack. The room was barely larger than a closet, lit by moonlight through a barred window. A narrow bed occupied most of the space, and on that bed sat a woman so thin and pale she looked like a ghost. Her blonde hair, once shining like wheat, now hung in lank, lifeless strands around a face that had forgotten hope. She wore a stained white gown, and her wrists bore the marks of restraints. Red welts that made Red Cloud want to burn this entire building to ash. Sarah, he whispered, dropping to his knees beside the bed. She did not look at him. Her green eyes, once so bright with intelligence and compassion, stared at nothing. She rocked slightly, back and forth, A rhythmic movement that spoke of hours spent in isolation with nothing but madness for company. Sarah, it is me. It is Red Cloud. I have come to take you home. Still no response. No flicker of recognition. Nothing. The nurse had warned him, but seeing Sarah like this, seeing the vibrant, brave woman he loved reduced to this hollow shell, felt like having his heart ripped from his chest while still beating. He reached out slowly and touched her hand. She flinched away, curling into herself like a wounded animal. "Do not hurt me," she whispered, her voice so small and broken it barely sounded human. "Please, I will be good. I will forget. I promise I will forget everything." Red Cloud felt tears burn his eyes for the first time since he was a child. "Oh, Sarah. What have they done to you?" Matu appeared in the doorway, keeping watch on the corridor. "Brother, we must go. Now. I hear footsteps on the floor below." But Red Cloud could not move. Could not force himself to grab Sarah and drag her away when she clearly did not even know him. "She does not remember me," he said, voice breaking. "Then make her remember," Matu urged. "Say something only she would know. Something from before this nightmare began." Red Cloud thought desperately, sorting through memories of their stolen afternoons under the cottonwood tree. Then it came to him. Something Sarah had told him once, a secret she said she had never shared with anyone. He took her hand gently, holding it even when she tried to pull away. "The night your mother died, you sat by her bed and promised her 3 things. That you would take care of your siblings. That you would never stop learning. And that you would live a life that mattered, even if it scared everyone around you. You told me that promise was the only thing that kept you alive through the years after." Sarah's rocking stopped. Her empty eyes slowly focused on his face, confusion replacing the blankness. "You said your greatest fear was not death or pain, but dying without ever being truly seen by another person," Red Cloud continued, his voice soft but urgent. "You said you felt invisible in a world full of people who looked at you but never saw you. And I told you that I saw you, Sarah. I saw your courage, your kindness, your beautiful stubborn spirit. I told you that you glowed like the sun in my eyes." A sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. Her hand tightened on his, no longer pulling away but holding on as if he were the only solid thing in a world of shadows. "Red Cloud," she whispered, and hearing his name from her lips felt like resurrection. "Yes," he said, tears streaming down his face now without shame. "I am here. I am real. And we are leaving this place." "But they said you were not real," Sarah said, confusion and hope warring in her expression. "Dr. Thornton said I invented you in my mind, that chiefs do not fall in love with white women, that everything I remembered was a delusion caused by fever and madness." They rode for 3 days straight, stopping only when the horses could go no further. Sarah grew stronger each day, as if distance from the asylum allowed pieces of herself to return. She still woke screaming from nightmares, still flinched at sudden movements, but her eyes grew clearer, her voice steadier. By the 3rd night, she could sit at their campfire and speak of what they had done to her without breaking down. "They wanted to kill the part of me that loved you," she said, staring into the flames. "Dr. Thornton said my feelings for you were a disease that could be cured with enough pain. He believed that if he hurt me enough, I would beg to forget you just to make the suffering stop." Red Cloud sat beside her, close but not touching, respecting the space she needed. "Did you ever wish to forget?" Sarah turned to him, and in the firelight, he saw the woman he had fallen in love with looking back at him. "Never. Even when I could not remember my own name, even when I did not know what was real and what was delusion, I held on to you. You were the truth they could not erase, the light they could not extinguish. Hating you would have been easier than loving you, but I chose love anyway, every single day." He reached for her hand, and this time she took it without hesitation, lacing their fingers together like they had that first time under the cottonwood tree. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We cannot go back to Fort Laramie. We cannot return to Denver. Where do 2 people like us belong?" "Nowhere," Red Cloud admitted. "And everywhere. We make our own place." Matu, keeping watch at the edge of their camp, spoke without turning around. "Riders coming. Many of them. From the direction of Denver." Red Cloud was on his feet instantly, hand on his knife. "How many?" 20, maybe more. Moving fast. They will be here within the hour." There was no time to run. The horses were exhausted, and Sarah was still too weak for a hard ride. Red Cloud surveyed their surroundings, looking for advantages, and found only one. They had made camp in a narrow canyon with steep walls on both sides, a single path in and out. If the soldiers wanted them, they would have to come through that passage in small groups, unable to use their superior numbers effectively. "We make our stand here," Red Cloud said. Sarah stood beside him, her jaw set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. "Then we stand together. I will not hide while you fight." The riders arrived as the sun set behind the canyon walls, casting long shadows across the ground. Colonel Whitmore led them, his cavalry uniform pressed and perfect despite 3 days of hard riding. Behind him rode soldiers and hired guns, all armed and clearly ready for violence. The colonel's face was a mask of cold fury as he surveyed their small camp. "Sarah," he called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "This has gone far enough. Come out peacefully, and I will overlook this madness. You were clearly not in your right mind when this savage kidnapped you." "Nobody kidnapped me, father," Sarah called back, stepping into view beside Red Cloud. "I am leaving because I choose to leave. Red Cloud rescued me from the hell you put me in." "That hell was for your own good," the colonel said, though something flickered in his expression. Doubt, perhaps, or shame quickly suppressed. "Dr. Thornton was helping you forget your delusions and return to yourself. He was destroying who I am to create who you wanted me to be," Sarah countered. "There is a difference, father. You just refuse to see it." The colonel's face hardened. "Stand aside, Sarah. This animal will be punished for what he has done. He attacked my fort, killed my men, and kidnapped my daughter. He will hang for his crimes." "Then you will have to hang me beside him," Sarah said, lifting a rifle to her shoulder with hands that barely trembled. "Because I will not let you take him without a fight." For the first time, the colonel seemed to truly see his daughter, not as the obedient girl he had raised but as the woman she had become. "You would die for him? For a savage who has done nothing but cause you pain and suffering?" "He is the only person who ever saw me as I truly am," Sarah replied. "The only person who did not try to change me or fix me or make me smaller to fit his expectations. You call that savagery, father. I call it love. And yes, I would die for it, because a life without love is not worth living anyway." Red Cloud felt his heart swell with pride and sorrow. Sarah had been through hell, but she had not broken. If anything, she had become stronger, more certain of who she was and what she believed. But that strength would not stop bullets, would not prevent the tragedy that seemed inevitable now. "Last chance," the colonel said, signaling his men to spread out. "Surrender now, or we come in shooting." Red Cloud stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and the soldiers. "Your daughter speaks the truth. I did not kidnap her. I freed her from a place where they tortured her mind and body for having the courage to love someone you deemed unworthy. That is the real crime here, Colonel."